Welcome, everybody, to Sunday Live with your host, Caleb. That's me.
Good evening, everyone.
Okay, Joe, we're going to start over. I'm muting your mic so we don't hear your room sound. And
Okay.
have you been unmuting it?
Yes, I can mute it. Hold on.
No. Don't touch it. Go ahead and leave it alone.
Sure.
And I'll mute it and unmute it as needed.
Absolutely.
All right, cool. Welcome, everyone, to Sunday Live. Welcome, everybody, to Sunday Live. My name is Caleb, and today we're going to be talking about something a little different. We've been having artists and musicians on the show, and we are now at episode 18. Hard to believe. Hope you're all doing well out there. So this week we're going to take a little break from guests, the usual kind of guests, and talk about something fundamental to all of us, including artists and musicians who have appeared on the show. But before that happens, I'm going to bring my sidekick Joe Price online. And let's see, just unmute him here.
Good evening. Good evening.
Hey, Joe, how the heck are you?
Very well. It's been a long, good, productive week. And it's at the end of it, and I couldn't be more relieved. But it's been a good week. And happy to be back.
Awesome. So as I was saying in the introduction, this week we do not have a human guest, but we are going to have a very special guest that's important to all of us. And that guest is called money. Oh yes, money. 3 great attributes of all our guests. Money has these 3 attributes: compensation, resources, and new creation. Not only does money allow artists and musicians to be paid for their work, it opens up the possibility of buying new gear, having resources, access to individuals and professionals who can mix and master their music, and it gives them the bandwidth to create new material. And in this time of COVID-19, there's a heck of a lot of people who are enjoying entertainment, whether it's TV entertainment, videos on YouTube, music, etc. All that stuff comes with time, investment, and yes, cash. So do please support your artists out there. Join their Patreon. If they have a Kickstarter to do an album in these times when they're locked up at home, please think about supporting them that way. Or just simply subscribe to their YouTube channels, their Facebook pages, and let them know you're out there and still listening. Now, unfortunately, the Facebook stream has decided to stop. I'm not going to try to baby it this week. Just going to let it roll here. Let the people on Facebook know that we are live on YouTube, and we'll have the video available for reviewing or restreaming off of the YouTube channel after we're done today. So one thing I want to do is present my music and money lecture that I presented back in October when I first came up to the Seattle area. That proved really popular, and I wanted to share with you that presentation. So during these challenging times, you can be thinking about, well, where does money come from in the music industry? What activities produce an income for musicians? The first thing you have to ask yourself is, who am I? Am I a songwriter? Am I a recording artist? Am I a performer? Am I a band member? Am I part of a professional organization? Am I a record label? How do I fit into this puzzle piece? And most people are going to fit under recording artist, singer-songwriter, and perhaps performer. They might fit under all 3, especially these days. So once you've figured out who you are in this scheme, this map of creating music and sharing it with people, you have to ask yourself and be honest. I do this because I love it, and therefore it is a hobby, or I do this to generate money. Therefore, it is a business. Doesn't mean your hobby can't become a business, but there's a very distinct difference. If you're doing business, you're in business. You can do anything as a hobby. That doesn't necessarily make it a business. The key factor to turning your hobby into a business is to be generating revenue and to be conducting yourself as a business. So you could be operating at a loss. Every business is allowed to fail. Every business is allowed to have a deficit. Every business is allowed to have write-offs while it's trying to get on its feet. You don't have to be making a profit to be a business. But you do need to approach things in certain ways. Got to get your ducks in a row. Set up your business license. Set up your LLC. Set up your relationships with other businesses and put contracts in place. And when you do that, you're going to say, as a business, I'm not going to just do anything. I'm going to do the things that generate revenue. So, what generates income within the music business? Up on screen is a nice pie chart, and you'll see over a quarter of all income from music is by playing live. Almost another quarter is teaching. So that's 50% of the pie is live and teaching. So if you're not doing those two things, you're already challenged at being a business. Now, you might be an employee of Pandora, Spotify, etc. So another 20% is people who work for the music industry. They work for a company that is already making income in the music industry. And then the last 10% here to get us to just over 45% of the pie is a session musician. In other words, you're a great musician. People like how you play. They bring you in the studio for recordings. You get, cash for doing that, and along the way you go. And you'll notice on this chart, most of the things you've heard about, record labels, songwriting, having a hit album, they're not in the first 45% of all of the money that comes in for the music business. In fact, you'll see songwriting is 6%. Recordings, 6%. T-shirts, 2%. There's other, I'm not quite sure what the 7% other there is. Perhaps it's bribing DJs to play your music or something. But right there, it gives you an idea of where is the money, therefore where is the business versus the hobby. So for myself, I write songs, I perform songs, and I perform, and I'm a recording artist. And so I'm operating only in that 12% space with my record label, my live shows, rest in peace, and my revenue stream from royalties. Is that the best way for me to be doing my business? The answer is no. I need to get out and start doing more gigs. I had a bunch scheduled up here in Seattle and was building that part of my business, and unfortunately everything shut down at around that time. So the next question is, well, how do people make up their live income in the time of COVID-19? And certainly having paid streams has become a thing. You can start putting out a tip jar with Patreon and Venmo and PayPal during live streams and getting revenue that way. And that's certainly a way to build it up. Now, if you happen to be like me and you do mainly do recordings and recording sales, we're going to go into the details of how that money comes in. And then lastly, after that, we're going to go into publishing and royalties as well. So as expected, without Facebook up and running, there's no one in the chat room. So I'm going to move right back to Joe. So Joe, are you familiar with all this stuff, or is this new for you?
Not entirely new. No, because a lot of the musicians that I know have dealt with these things in the past. Now, COVID-19 coming along this past winter and spring is redefining the format, redefining everything at this point. How we proceed from here during and post-COVID is going to be a lot of things being redefined, repurposed. So the things that we're familiar with up until this spring may not count. It may not be relevant afterwards. And we can't see, that's a crystal ball that few people have.
Yeah, one of the bands I'm consulting with just said yesterday, how many streams count towards my charting? And then they asked the question I didn't expect. They said, how much of my merchandise counts towards my charting. Now, we're all used to the idea of, okay, streaming is like radio, so therefore it should count on your, on your single getting into the charts, right? But there is a bunch of recalculation going on that also involves how many t-shirts, how much social media do you have, how much engagement do you have, and that's starting to become a signifier of how well you're doing in the market.
Yes, somehow reminded of concerts of past. There's always a merchant's table for all the paraphernalia for the given acts that are performed. It could be CDs, it could be T-shirts, it could be hoodies, it could be tickets for future gigs. So that was something you would see almost all the time, especially with the larger acts. But that has also been placed online. You can have like a side window for that gives you offers to download and click to order these things through the internet as the performance is happening.
And I'm seeing more and more artists retreat from social media. They'll have a presence there, but the real they're having private social media where fans pay to get access to them, get access to their early recordings, etc., and kind of getting off the free platforms to a degree.
It's funny, in the not too distant past, you had people back and forth about the free music on the internet being something that would impinge on their success as recording artists. And you heard different positions between different recording artists. For example, Metallica did not like their music on the internet at all because to them it was paramount to theft. And whereas with Radiohead, they gave away music on the internet because for them, that was like, it wasn't a loss of revenue so much as it was free advertising and free exposure. So you had to weigh one against the other. Were you giving away the music to where it was theft or not getting paid for it? Or were you getting free advertising? Depend on your outlook.
Yeah, I think everybody watched what happened to Metallica and didn't want to repeat the same thing. And they got smart. And Nine Inch Nails, Radiohead, they recognized that the era of selling physical media was over and that they had to retool their business. And bands that hadn't toured in years dusted off the keyboards and guitars and got on the road and started playing because live music was where the revenue was. As you see from my chart, 6% of income out there, and that was before COVID. So they really realized that, if they used it as a calling card, they may get more fans. By putting the album out for free, they might get more butts and seats at a concert, and that's going to make them more money anyhow.
Exactly. A sad example of this, was tragic, was a legendary recording artist, Dick Dale, surf guitar legend from the early 60s. He performed throughout. I got to meet with him and talk with him. He was very much into martial arts and health and fitness and rigor. And he played in the early 2000s at 19 Broadway in Fairfax. He played a couple of shows there. And in later years, he was sick, but he had to keep performing, even though he wasn't in the best of shape or in the best of health, because recording is how he paid for his medical bills. He had problems with diabetes, I think, and even I think dialysis. But he had medical bills he had to pay, and he had medical things that he had to do for treatment to keep him alive. But the only way he could pay for that, he had to perform. He performed right up until the very end, and it was with not very long before his final performance that he passed away. But he was very, very dependent on live gigs to support his medical expenses.
Yeah, the reality is I don't think the streaming companies are willing to give back the keys to the kingdom at this point. They were given a free pass to get up and running and get their businesses up and running. And the idea was that eventually they'd start paying artists, but like any business that gets established, it wants to continue with the current rules. So there's some progress on increasing royalties to artists and recognizing that that new platform needs to compensate artists for their work. But it is coming on the back of 20 years of free downloads. So it's very hard for an artist that, yeah, I would go out, spend 20 years on the road, and then retire and live off their back catalog in their old age. That's no longer a viable model.
No, but it's even why older you have these revival bands. Well, bands that come out of retirement, people like Roger Waters, who should have been able to retire long ago. He's having to go back on the road again and retire. Even Roger Daltrey to a lesser extent. And streaming services like Pandora and Spotify have not helped matters at all.
You know, it's true, and yet, like any distribution channel, I can get a song out globally around the world, and if someone picks it up and thinks it's a cool thing and puts it on their playlist, it's going to give me an audience that I wouldn't be able to find otherwise. So they do play a strong role and potentially very beneficial role. There is a certain amount of the independents being put back in their independent place and the professionals getting a certain preference and all that. And yet at the same time, flipping the coin over again, I have a single that is on a playlist and I look down this list and it's all professional big bands, and there's little old me on that list just because the topic of that song fits in with the topic or theme of those other songs. So I think from the fan and the person making the playlist standpoint, they don't really care if you're independent or major. It's, you know, do you fit their gig, and do you fit in with the playlist theme? So I encourage people to seek out not just the main playlists, but the different playlists of your friends, your neighbors, different topics you're into. Look up on Spotify and find those playlists, because that's bringing in some revenue for me.
Absolutely, that's a very good point. Following the traditional algorithms might get you things that you've seen before, and whereas if you don't follow those traditional algorithms, look up something you're not used to listening to. You may not like that one song, but the 10 other songs that appear maybe new discoveries for you. The best music I've ever found, I found it by accident and online.
That's a good point. A lot of the bands I've followed for decades have been people I found out in cutout bins and record shops decades ago. So back to the presentation, I want to bring up this slide again. Ask yourself, am I a songwriter? Am I a recording artist? Am I a performer? Am I one of those? Am I two of those? Am I all three? If you are all three, and you want to bring in revenue from all three sources, you need to sort out three things. You need to sort out your record label, which frankly, for most people, it doesn't make any sense to sign to a record label. Go and create, Joe Blow Record Label LLC and set up your record label. And then distribute through TuneCore, CD Baby, whichever you prefer. And write your music, record the music, and get it out there. In this Venn diagram, there's two other areas of overlap. Band. Put together a live band and start performing your recordings live on the internet. What you can do, streaming has all sorts of challenges, but you could have all your friends video them playing their part live, edit that video together, and broadcast as if it was live. That's what a lot of people are doing right now, because trying to sync up multiple instruments just doesn't seem to be practical with today's technology. So that's a great way to get out there and start performing. And so if someone's watching a live video of everybody in lockdown, and you put out your PayPal and say, hey, donate to my band's live show. Or, hey, if you're big enough and you got the pull, sell tickets in advance. Help compensate yourself for putting together that video. And then performer, right? Once you have that band, you're now performing those songs. Well, how do you get paid for your song? you wrote the song and you're performing the song, technically that venue where you perform should pay royalties for your performance. And that goes to ASCAP, BMI, maybe SESAC if you're lucky. But primarily in the United States, ASCAP, BMI. So make sure you got your pro account set up as a songwriter. And what's not on here is, how does the pro know to pay you as a songwriter? They pay through the publisher. So set up your publishing company. So you should at least have a record label, a band, and a publishing company that works with your pro account. So if you're unfamiliar with these terms, feel free to message me on Facebook and I'm willing to help out. Let's go back to the recording artist piece. How does that work? That's kind of the classic. So I have a record label called Asylum Arts, and I have myself and several other friends on the record label. The revenue that comes in for that label, as you can see by this chart, used to be physical media back in 2005, and you see a drop off of physical media. Digital downloads expanded as physical media collapsed, but you see a curious thing has happened since 2015. 2014 was the peak of digital downloads. And now that is contracting. People are not downloading songs anymore. But what they are doing is they are streaming. And when you stream, like being on the radio, it is a performance of the song. So performance royalties are going up. And what happens is the performance royalties actually paid to the publisher and the songwriter. But there is a relationship between the record label paying the songwriter as well. Another element here you see in red is synchronization. This is when you hear songs in TV shows and movies and whatnot. And you can see starting in 2010, that has been an expanding market. More and more people are getting songs placed in TV shows.
Also videos as well, video games.
Video games. Oh, that's a great point, Joe. Video games are really, they have a great income stream. And if you place yourself in a video game, it's almost like you're dialing it back to the early 2000s in the type of revenue stream, because your song is going out in a fixed form, in a fixed media. If you can get on the game area, then it's great. Great. I put that maybe in the other on the chart as a revenue stream, but gaming is a different set of contracts as publishing, a different set of contracts as recording, etc. Let's look at the publishing side. So again, you're the songwriter. You write a song. A band then records that song. I should say a recording artist records that song. Every copy of that song sold, you give 9.1 cents back to the songwriter. And then that song got played on the radio, and that's considered a live performance. Believe it or not, when the recording of the song gets played live, it is not a sale of the recording. It does not go back to the band. It goes to the songwriter because it's a performance of the song. Now, the band might be paid to come to an interview while they're playing the song live on the radio, and then they might get paid in another way. But what happens is that money then goes to the pro, BMI or ASCAP. They gather up all these pennies. And then they say, who's the writer of this song? And they send half of it directly to the writer. And then they send half of it to the publisher. Half of the half, or a quarter, the publisher keeps for their costs and expenses. And then the other half they send on to the writer. Seems strange, right? Why would the publisher be given half and the writer be getting half when the publisher has to give up half of the half? Why doesn't it just all go straight to the writer? It used to always go to the publisher, and the publisher would manage their writers. Unfortunately, there were so many scams that eventually the rules changed, where at least the writer would get a direct 50%. So that's a classic model. Now, the publishers and the professional royalty organizations have to do a lot of work to find those pennies. Here's a map, one map, many of them online that show you how all these pennies flow through different sources. You have a bar that just played your song, and maybe the karaoke version, maybe the full recording. It's now a performance of your song, and they have a annual fee or a monthly fee with ASCAP and BMI. So a certain percentage of that fee is then allocated to you. In many cases, this has become untenable. You know, people used to sit at bars and write down all the songs that played and they'd send in the lawyers to get the bar to pay their part of their ASCAP fee. That stopped being very tenable. So now pretty much people pay flat fees to play any song, any artist that's a BMI or ASCAP artist. And then at the end of the year, they just say, how much record is there of this song getting played? And then they cut up a percentage and say, okay, we're going to give 1% there, 1% there, etc. We probably know that a famous performer is going to get a bigger cut of that. But there's also a lot of people just don't sign up for ASCAP or BMI. So literally money is coming in from your song's performance and just sitting in a general pot. And after a while, that then gets redistributed out to all the artists who are signed up. So if you're not signed up with a pro and you're songwriting or making music out there, you're walking away from some money. So, Joe, I have an idea here,
Yes.
which is I'm thinking let's do a rebroadcast. Once we finish this episode, let's go ahead and do a rebroadcast, and I'll try to get Facebook to work directly, and then we go there, because I just looked in the chat room and I don't see anybody. So I think that might be a good way to go.
Everyone will see us in hindsight.
So again, that wraps up my presentation on money and music and money. This slide shows your revenue streams. Again, if you find some way to play live, obviously that's shrunk a massive amount during COVID-19. But people are still doing it. People still have followers, and they're finding ways of building fan clubs that are paid, of doing paid online streams, etc., to shore up that live revenue. There's even, performing in separate environments and putting the videos together as live concerts. There's a lot of different ways that people are being clever about rebuilding that live income. Teach people. I'm coaching a couple bands on revenue and how to get their ducks in a row early in their career so they don't run into problems when the money really starts coming and everybody starts asking for their cut. They're going to have their contracts in place and they're going to know what's what. So if you're not teaching, teach. Use Zoom to teach vocal lessons, guitar, etc. And then, reach out there, maybe supplement your income by working for Pandora, some other company where they're bringing in revenue. That's a strong business in the entertainment industry. Everybody's home listening to music, watching movies, and that's a great opportunity.
Get back some of that revenue. If you work for Pandora or Spotify, you can get back some of that revenue that would otherwise have been lost.
That's a good point. If you're a recording artist and you want to get money from Pandora, probably going and getting a day job there will bring in some additional cut of that cash that they have.
It's funny with what's happened with what's been happening with COVID-19, and a lot of the playing field being leveled between people who might have been more comfortable incomes working versus people with lesser incomes, and entire industries putting people out of work, entire industries themselves being crippled, let alone the lack of employees they could support. People speak of the playing field being leveled. A great example of that might be some of the musicians that you have semi-successful bands that are just up and coming, and they're actually making headway, and then the COVID-19 hits, and then you see buskers on the street performing for money, and it's back to square one, and more people are busking on the streets these days. Performance artists. It could be performing arts. It could be acting or comedy or some sort, theater, street theater, or it could be musicians. You see live bands performing on street corners. This is the stuff of lore. Creedence Clearwater Revival wrote songs about this. Violent Femmes got started this way, busking outside of other people's concerts. They were discovered by Chrissy Hind. So this is this kind of folksy, beginnings of how bands become successful. But here we are, square one all over again. In this regard, the playing field tends to be said to be leveled, but not for the better, regrettably.
Yeah, I'd say that there was a leveling, and then there's been some ways some de-leveling happening, where the big boys who really were shooken up when the industry changed and they didn't know what to do other than bring in the lawyers and sue and do whatever they did in the past, they finally figured out, we better get on this new bandwagon and get on with Apple and get on with downloads, and then get on with streaming and traditional American revenue streams, which is advertising. So you listen to your Pandora and you get your ads, and then if you want to get a premium membership so you don't hear ads, a cut of that then is going to the big labels, the big companies, really. I wouldn't even call them record labels, but Disney, etc.
The state of affairs today.
So again, bring up the revenue stream image here, and if you'd like So this week's Mystic Moment. If you are creative, it doesn't mean you are the enemy of business. If you are a business person, you are not the enemy of creative. There is a role that creatives play in business and business plays in creativity. Let go of any sense of competition between these two. It is simply a question of, do I do what I do just because I love it, or do I want to do what I'm doing because I want to be in business? That's up to you. There's no conflict. It simply is a decision of whether or not you're going to do your creativity as a hobby or as a business. If you're going to do it as a business, you have to do that. You can't expect businesses to come to you today and say, oh, you are a creative asset, and make you a partner in the business without you having a stake in that. If you've been looking to get into business, I mentioned a couple books beforehand. Check those out. other industries. There are plenty of people doing tutorials online. YouTube is a fantastic resource. Find out how your creativity overlaps with the business world, and then decide if you want to work in that space. I wanted to cover that this week because I've heard so much growing up, going through university, artists just treating business as the enemy and then expecting business to come to them with a handout. And it doesn't work. The world does not work that way.
It's funny, you hear about the old hipster stereotypes about being into a band or a musician before anyone else was into it, and then abandoning them when they have any measure of success, claiming they have sold out.
Right.
It's funny, but it's not a stereotype we can afford that anymore.
No, and I think if you say that a band is sold out, you haven't been really listening to that band. Great story about how Blondie, Go-Go's, Blondie, a lot of those bands that they came up in the punk scene, the American punk scene, and as soon as they had a pop hit, they're, oh, you've sold out, you've betrayed us, and it's like, no, you're just not tuning into what they're doing. And you go back and listen to those Blondie records, there's plenty of punk sensibilities there, and there was plenty of pop sensibilities in their earlier work. So, yeah, I find the sold out thing doesn't ride, and maybe it's that maybe it's the idea of you're part of the community, you're poor like us, and as soon as you have any income, you're no longer poor like us in the sense that you've left us and all that sort of thing, or that people own you or own your work. That's another big thread I see a lot in fandom.
A lot of it just can be boiled down to good old-fashioned envy. Frankly, if I hear of somebody is sold out, I'm grateful. At least they have something to sell.
Yes, and just because you think they've sold out doesn't mean they have any more money than they did before. It just means someone might have put them in a lot of debt. Well, I'm going to wrap up our YouTube stream, and then we're going to go over to Facebook and do the episode there and see what's going on with this stream. At least we have it documented on YouTube. Thank you if you are on YouTube watching this. I greatly appreciate that. And we will see you. Oh, there is one person, so I best say hello before I leave. So hello, Michelle, and thank you as always for Joe being here. Greatly appreciate you watching these episodes and me having the opportunity to share artists with you. We have 3 great artists coming up starting next week in a series, and they are independent songwriters, recording artists, and performers, and they will be presenting their new singles on the show, and please do tune in. Ciao. As always, you can find me on Facebook as Caleb Duart, my Bandcamp, calebandcamp.com, audioterrace.com, queerblue.com, and their associated YouTube channels. Again, thank you for watching this week, and we'll see you next week with the premiere of Sky Nelson's latest single.